I got the music in me, knew it simply had to be my destiny. I'm blessed to be the best within my C-N-H-E-N-D. Please believe not Ninja Gaiden. I'm not the guy to fight with them lightning. They come in dumb and I leave them enlightened.
What's up, my wizards? Dev from SBMTG down there. We got decks and stuff. Here's a deck that I've been sort of obsessed with for about a month now. I've been building it and it's gone through a lot of different phases. And it's been a lot of different things, but it's always had the same concept. Calastria healer combo this deck is. Like I said, I've been working hard on it. Here's what I've come up with. Well, the deck focuses primarily on the interaction between 3 cards in this format. 4 copies in the deck of Calastria Healer, 4 copies of Evolutionary Leap, and then 4 copies of March from the Tomb, or you could do 4 copies of Rally the Ancestors. Now there's arguments for both, and I'll get to that in a second. You could even split it 2 and 2. I've done that a few times. That's worked out pretty well. As far as Calastria Healer goes, this is obviously the namesake of the deck, with the most important card in the deck. If you could, say, rally 4 copies of this from your graveyard into play, you just, that's 16 life lost on their side, 16 life gained on your side. Now, that won't happen most of the time. What will happen is that over the course of the game, you'll play these. You'll Evolutionary Leap into them, one to the other. You'll hop from one to the other, dealing incremental damage over time, and then you'll usually get 3, maybe 4, but usually just 2 or 3 out of the graveyard with a March of the Tomb or a Rally. And you won't win all in one fell swoop, Usually it's incremental. The way this deck usually has been winning for me, at least, I have rallied or marched 4 of them into play all at one time. A few times in playtesting, I've been able to test this deck a little bit more than usual. Like I said, I've been obsessed with it. But it's not going to be every game that you're able to get all 4 of them all at one time. So don't have pipe dreams about that. It's usually just, incremental value over time that's going to win the fight for you. Evolutionary Leap, I don't know that I want to play 4 copies of this, but we have to play 4 copies of this because we have to see it. It's our only sack outlet. Now we could just, Calastria Healer could die in combat and we could draw into more Calastria Healers. That does happen, totally happens, but it's always good to have a link. And if you have an Evolutionary Leap out and a Calastria Healer, you start the turn and you can basically leap into as many healers as you have, the mana for. It's not uncommon to play 2 healers in one turn and leap twice, That happens in the mid-game a lot, and that really sets you up. And then as far as the selection between March from the Tomb and Rally the Ancestors, it works this way. As far as March goes, you get to keep your Calastria Healers, which can be pretty important, because you're not going to be able to, you're not going to be able to rally them all into play and sack them to Evolutionary Leaps. So that they go back to the graveyard rather than being exiled, Now what you can do is, at instant speed, rally your Calastria Healers into play and then block creatures, which is very, very important. They'll go to the graveyard, they won't exile, that's pretty important. However, March from the Tomb is a little bit more reliable in that you get to keep your healers no matter what happens, Obviously, if you block with them and they die, they die. They go to the graveyard. But you're not that worried about them going to the graveyard, just you really don't want to run the risk of them getting exiled. And you don't want the Rally the Ancestors to sit dead in your hand while you're waiting on the mana to be able to leap all of them away, So that can be an issue too, because you really don't want them to get exiled, because you're in big trouble if that happens. So I'd be like, hate Silk Wrap, that can be a terrible card if we don't have a leap that we can, respond with a leap to a Silk Wrap. But in any case, we really don't want our guys to get exiled. That is a nightmare. So sometimes we don't want to run the risk with Rally Ancestors. It's a little bit faster. It's a 1 mana faster because we're only going to ever pay 4 for it. And it's instant speed, which is a huge deal, We can slip under the radar as soon as control taps out. That can be important because we have obviously some issues against control. And it's just good against aggro because it gives us blockers. And, we can block at instant speed. Our Calastria Healers go back to the graveyard. We're totally fine with that. Well, that's the basic idea behind the deck. Let's dump as many Calastria Healers in the graveyard as we can. We don't play any creatures other than Calastria Healer so that we can ensure that when we sacrifice a healer, we get another healer through Evolutionary Leap. We can absolutely make sure of it if that's the only creature we're playing. And we rally or march them all back into play for a huge life swing all at one time. Well, the rest of the deck has to be tuned to achieve that end as efficiently as possible. There are a lot of ways to do it in the format, and the deck has gone through a lot of different changes and evolutions, pardon the pun. But in any case, the deck has been a straight-up Abzan deck. I found that was okay. The deck has been has added blue because I wanted to play Treasure Cruise and Tigan Scheming. I thought would be pretty cool. But at the end of the day, I decided we didn't want to dump too many cards into the graveyard. That's not necessarily where we're at. We don't want to be as quick as possible because there's a lot of stuff in this format that can disrupt us. That can be an issue. And honestly, we try to pull it off as quickly as possible. There's still a lot of decks that go up under us, and the decks that are above us can take care of us until they can take over the game. So we had a real stability issue until I just went with every color except for blue. We added red to Abzan, and that has helped us out an awful lot. So we'll get to that in just a second, but I just wanted to tell you what colors the deck was. We're going to start off here, though, with 2 copies of Gather the Pack, and then 4 copies of Seek the Wilds. This was flipped when I started the deck, but like I said, I decided quickly that I didn't want to dump too many cards in the graveyard. Yeah, it's fine when you can dump Calastria Healer into the graveyard, get it back later, but for the most part, we want to actually play the card, and we want to be able to leap into as many copies of it in our deck as possible. So we don't necessarily want to dump them into the graveyard, and we're playing a lot of removal in the deck so that we can get to the point that we can reliably healer them to death. So we don't want to dump those cards in the graveyard either, especially since we're not playing Den Protector because we can't play any other creatures in the deck. So brief explanation of why we're only playing 2 Gather the Pack. Although it is cool when you have Spell Mastery and you sometimes luck into 2 healers you can put into your hand. That's great, so I want to play some amount of them. And the 4 Seek the Wilds, very important that you can either put a healer into your hand, which is what we're really looking for, or get a land drop, which we also need. Considering we're playing 4 colors, this can really help us get, filter through the colors that we need. Before I move on, I was playing Scout the Borders in the deck, but it just appeared a little bit too slow, and I didn't like it overall. I felt like it was overkill on the cards like this. Now let's get into some removal. I'm just going to go through all the red cards, and it's going to be a series of 3-ofs, but they're all very, very important to the deck. We're playing 3 copies of Mardu Charm, which I could see as a 4-of, by the way. Mardu Charm, very important. What this was in the Abzan deck was called the Scions. Call Scions was okay, it allowed us to have blockers and tokens that we could leap into Calastria Healer with. That was important. But end of the day, Mardu Charm is just much, much better. We added red, and Mardu Charm is one of the better additions we can make to the deck. Not only can it kill creatures, something we're very, very big on. We've got to kill smaller creatures and even mid-sized creatures so that we can make it to the point in the game, because we don't have really any blockers aside from Calastria Healer, which, we're going to try to play it, but we definitely have to have something that blows creatures away to keep us safe in the early to mid-game. Mardu Charm does that. It also creates tokens that we can leap into healers with or block with. You can block and then leap into a healer once the block is established. So that's a really good play too. We can make control decks discard important pieces, which is awesome for us. So just everything Mardu Charm does is amazing, and I definitely want to play at least the 3 copies. 3 copies of Kolaghan's Command in the deck. This obviously not only gets us healers back from the graveyard, which can be incredibly important, but it can blow away small creatures. It also allows us to do a small amount of incremental damage over the game. It's good. We've also got another card in the deck that does some damage, some incidental damage. And this can really make the difference when your Calastria healers aren't, quite up to snuff, and you're only able to get 2 out of a march or a rally, This little bit of extra damage you can do with a card like Kolaghan's Command is actually pretty important and adds up. But mostly we're going to be blowing away small creatures with it. We can get our Calastria healers back, super important. And again, another discard thing, we can make control discard important pieces that we really don't want them to have against us. Mostly counter magic, but we really don't care if control removes our guys. As long as they're not silk wrapping or otherwise exiling our Calastria healers, we don't care, and for the most part, their removal is dead in their hand for 90% of the game. But, that in mind, control can counter our important pieces, so it's good to have things that make them discard cards. And to finish off the red cards, 3 copies of Crackling Doom, just one of the more important cards in the entire format. And especially, we hate big creatures that just take out huge chunks of our life total all at one time. So something like Crackling Doom that just takes out the biggest threat on the table, and that incidental 2 damage, I've talked about it, with Kolaghan's Command, it also is great in this case. Really can make the difference in the end. But mostly we're just looking to take out the biggest guy on the board. 3 copies of Reclaim in the deck? Yeah, it's kind of weird, right? Again, we can't play Den Protector. We could play Den Protector. I don't really want to, though. I just want to play all the Calastria healers, no other creatures to get in the way of the strategy. So Reclaim can be really, really important. It's instant speed, so you can just do it at the end of their turn, and it replaces your draw step, essentially. That can be okay, especially because you're going to get not only Calastria healers back, March from the Tomb can come back. You obviously can't get Rally back, so that's that's another reason not to play Rally. But just saying. Oh, but you know, if you dumped Rally into the graveyard with a Gather the Pack, you can get it back with a Reclaim. That's a thing. But for the most part, we're also getting back a lot of removal. That's very important. We can get back a Mardu Charm, which is always a good recast. We can get back a Kolaghan's Command. You know, that allows us to kill a small creature or do 2 damage and get a class or healer back. Just everything we can get back from the graveyard is important. We have to be able to do that in this deck. So Reclaim is a good option because it allows us not only to get the stuff back, right, but to do it at a very cheap cost, which allows us to do other stuff. You know, during our turn, we can play something, and then at the end of their turn, reclaim. So all of what Reclaim does is awesome. And I don't mind too much that it replaces the draw step, as long as it's with something important. Reclaim is great. 2 copies of Abzan Charm in the deck. Another important piece of removal. Again, we hate big creatures. We especially hate Siege Rhino because they gain some of that life back that they've hopefully been losing. Either that or they haven't lost any life to play with Siege Rhino, and it just puts us even farther behind. So that can be an issue. But we have to be able to kill big creatures. So Abzan Charm does that. And it allows us to draw some cards, which can be very important for us. And to finish off the main deck, 2 copies of Murderous Cut. It was 4 copies of Murderous Cut, but then I stopped playing the Gather the Packs. So I figured 2 Murderous Cut is about right, and it's been working pretty well. I mean, we don't want to go too far beyond this, although I could see playing 3 Murderous Cut. You know, it's very important to kill creatures in the mid-game, and that's what Murderous Cut does best. I want to at least play some copies of it. It's very important. Here are the lands. There's 26 of them, and again, the Shambling Vents, super, super important. Gives us another threat and allows us to sort of help out our life total a bit in the mid-game, which can be very important for us. Blocking a guy, gaining some life back, that can buy us a whole turn or 2 sometimes, and that can just be super sweet. So, yes. But again, I'll say this, the land base is pretty tight in the deck. You know, we want to make sort of a hierarchy of really black and then green or white and then red at the very bottom. So I think we pull it off just right. And yeah, honestly, this is the land base that I want to stick with. Although I will say, I wouldn't mind adding maybe a Jungle Hollow instead of the Lawnmower Waste, but we need cards, we need lands that come into play untapped. And here's our first sideboard. You heard that right. I've got an alternate sideboard for the first time ever. I don't think I've ever done that on this channel. But here's the first sideboard, sort of the primary sideboard here. Obnixilis is another way to win the game and draws cards and blows away creatures. Everything pertinent. I'd like to play it in the main deck. I don't like it in the main deck. I've tried it a couple times. I really only like it when we absolutely need another way to win or a way to dig. It's also great to blow away mid-range creatures. Love Obnix. 2 Silk Wrap, that's pretty obvious. We need help against aggro, and especially Soulfire Grandmaster. We really, really hate Soulfire Grandmaster, which is also why we're playing the 2 copies of Wild Slash, by the way. Not only can we blow away small creatures in the early game, we can kill a Soulfire Grandmaster, which is very important. And the Wild Slash gives us another way of dealing some damage to sort of make up for a game where we're a little slow on the business of healing, you know? So those are both important to take out smaller creatures. 2 copies of Duress, which is important against control, and yeah, we've got a lot of stuff that makes them discard in the main deck, but I really like to go early with the discard and get those important cards out of their hand so it lets us set up. So 2 Duress. 2 copies of Despise in the sideboard. Again, just like Duress, but against aggressive decks, this is a fine card, you know. We got to be able to get the big threats out of their hand before they can even play them. That's a good way to go. And on the 3rd turn, you know, we can still nab, especially if we're on the play, we can nab a lot of very important creatures and still play a leap or a healer. So, yeah, Despise has been pretty good out of the board. 3 copies of Radiant Flames in the sideboard here. Again, against aggro, we gotta have it. I mean, we absolutely do. Because, yeah, we have a lot of removal in the deck. It's like 13 pieces of removal or something. It's a lot of removal. But against smaller decks, you know, we don't get to play a lot of our removal until like the 3rd turn at all. So we have to have something against smaller decks. And Radiant Flame, sure, we still don't get to play it until the 3rd turn, but bust up everything. So yes. 1 copy of Mardu Charm here, just supplementary to the main deck. Anytime we want to make more tokens so we can block more, blow more creatures away, you know. Just Mardu Charm, I really want to play 4 copies of it in the main deck, but it's just not necessarily flex enough. And then 2 copies of Surge of Righteousness to finish it off. Just an incredibly important card. Knocks out a threat against very aggressive decks, usually. And we gain the 2 life, which is super important, you know. Just anything to keep us in the game for an extra turn or 2, you know. So blowing away a guy and gaining 2 life is just insane, and we gotta have that. I would be willing to play this in the main deck if red aggro decks were a little more popular. And this is the supplementary sideboard, the board you could play instead. We're basically sideboarding into Abzan Red here. Just really, really powerful options out of the sideboard here, you know. The Languish we could play in the main deck, or even the sideboard of, you know, the first sideboard I showed you. But I think Radiant Flame is more important in that first sideboard than Languish would be. And 1 copy of Crackling Doom, supplementary to the main deck. Again, I'd like to play this in the other sideboard. There's just not much room for it. But Crackling Doom is just one of the most important cards in the format, so yes. 4 copies of Siege Rhino, right? right? I mean, the Rhino is available in these colors, so I can totally see playing him out of the sideboard. And he's kind of cool with Clash Grade Healer, not because you gain the life, he's not an ally, obviously, but just because he's a little bit of extra, he's like Burn, you know, he's a little bit of extra damage and can help out your life total, so you can have another turn to heal. You know, that's cool too. 3 copies of Den Protector, again, we're subbing into Abzan Red. We've got so many things that we'd like to Den Protector out of the graveyard that I wouldn't even necessarily want to cut the Reclaims. I mean, with this sideboard, you can cut the Healers, the March from the Tombs, or the Rallies, which I don't even know if you'd want to cut the Rallies. And then maybe 2 or 3 copies of the Leap. You don't even have to completely cut the Leap, although you could cut all 4 copies, and then just put this entire sideboard in, you know. 2 copies of Tassiger, mostly for the same reason we play Den Protector. We play a lot of really good cards, we want to get them back. And then 2 copies of Wild Slash, just for the same reasons I've already outlined. And then 2 copies of Dromoka's Command, which I would also like to play in the other sideboard I showed you, you know. Dromoka's Command is just good. We can take out especially Silk Wraps. That's very important that we're able to kill Silk Wraps. That's awesome. And here are your power rankings for this deck. A final score of 65, which doesn't sound like much, but it's typically hard to score combo decks like this and very, very synergistic decks like this on this system here. So a 64, 65, that area is not really bad for a combo deck because, you know, those are often going to be low because they're low in a lot of categories, but there's no corresponding categories that they could be high in other than Synergy, you know. Well, that's all I got for now. Let me know how you felt about this one down in the comment section. I'm working on a lot, taking a lot of different forms before it reached this final form. This is it at 100%. But in any case, I really want to know how you felt about it. Shuffle it up. Let me know if it works for you. It's been working for me pretty freaking well, so I hope it works for you too. I want you to build it. It's not bad at all. If you enjoyed this content, do the YouTube stuff. Hit the thumbs up button, and again, comment and sub if you're new or if you just haven't done it yet. I'd really appreciate your subscription. Well, I'm Deb from SBMTG. As always, thanks for watching, my wizards.